Good morning, everyone. Sorry, that was a little loud. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you so much.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Brand Innovators, for hosting us. We love being a part of this crew. It's great to see a full room this morning, Monday morning, first day of AdWeek. So thank you all for being here, and hopefully you learn a little something in this next half hour. Great to be in New York. Congrats to all the Jets fans. And not so much the Giants fans, unless you had money on the game because you covered. So if you know, you know. So, all right. So let's get into this. Diana, welcome.
Thank you.
My name's Jason Poinsette. I am head of food and beverage at Snapchat. We get to work with so many incredible partners across the CPG food and bev category, like Kraft Heinz, and just want to welcome everybody to the star of the show, Diana Frost, Chief Growth Officer at Kraft Heinz, not United,
and
right?
Also United. Very exciting.
Congrats on the dual role and the promotion.
Thank you.
All right. We had to get that out of the way. It's Monday. All right. So before we get into it, let's just learn a little something about yourself. I know you've got a really fascinating journey. As much as you're comfortable sharing, both personally and professionally, just to help get to know you.
Great. Yeah. So, hi, everyone. So, I've been with Kraft Heinz. I actually joined in the middle of the pandemic. So, I don't know how many of you guys started new jobs in the middle of the pandemic, but any raised hands here. So, I've been a CPG lifer. So, started my career at PepsiCo, then went over to Mars for 13 years, where covered everything from marketing to sales strategy to transformation. And then in 2020, got the phone call to join Kraft Heinz, actually at the time as Chief Growth Officer within the Canadian business. So born and raised Canadian, still actually live in Toronto and do a lot of commuting to New York and Chicago. And so one of the things that really got me, and what I learned early on in my career, is that I loved transformation. If you put me on something that was doing really, really well, I kind of got bored. And so what I really learned early on was that whether it's cultural or business, being able to kind of pull things apart to put it back together, and what greater opportunity than the opportunity that came to me at Kraft Heinz, a wonderful legacy business that went through a lot of years of tough times. And so when the opportunity presented itself, a lot of my friends at the time within the industry were like, "Are you insane?" But it was more this intentionality to transform. And at the time, it was known as a bank that sold food. And so the opportunity was, how do you actually transform this business into a food company? And if you think about especially what's happening in the macroeconomic environment right now with inflation and everything else, what about accessible food? What about accessible nourishment? What about food that makes you feel good? So to have this opportunity to be a part of a transformation of this company and really taking it to a food business is something that I've really enjoyed over the last number of years.
So when you come into a role like that, I mean, what are the first things that you noticed? I mean, from a cultural standpoint, product standpoint, just in general, like as you embark on this journey of like transforming the company, what were some of the first things that you noticed?
Yeah, great question. And I think one of the first things when you come into a business like this, and just for context, we are in 55 categories, 35 brands, 70 countries. So you walk in, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to simplify this? And I think what it ultimately came down to, and you think about this idea, notion of a bank that sold food, it was the heart and the soul of the brands were missing. There wasn't a love for these brands. You're in 97% of households across North America. And you've got your team members who haven't fallen in love with your brands again. You've got your agency partners who are being squeezed like crazy. And so one of the first things when you think about joining a business like this and where the opportunity was really just glaringly obvious is, how do we fall in love with our own brands again and be confident in the fact that we have brands that people would kill to work on, but we weren't falling in love with the brands ourselves. And that was kind of piece number one, to start one foot in front of the other of transforming some of these iconic brands.
So in your position, and any similar position, you're challenged both long-term brand growth and obviously immediate short-term results.
Yep.
How do you balance that expectation across your team and across the company and with the investment community?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think about in any approach to marketing is ambition with discipline. That's kind of the first thing is having a big ambition. Because what I find a lot of times is we incrementalize our way to making change. And so the first thing was actually publicly and declaring a big ambition to transform. And one of the things, I've been in this role for North America for about a year now, was going out to the investor community and actually declaring, we want to be the most innovative food company in the world. And at first people were like, well, okay, cool. Well, what does that mean? And declaring $2 billion in incremental growth. So the minute you put a number out there like that into the market and into the community, quite frankly, it's then you can't just slowly change the way you do things. You have to make big leaps and bounds in how you organize your team, how you incentivize your team, who you partner with, and what that means. So it's changing the way you do business, but it all starts with a much bigger ambition. And then making sure that as you balance the short and long term, that the short is in service of the long. And look, that's a lot easier said than done, especially with the pressures that all of our businesses face. But if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I am putting one foot in front of the other. I am changing and organizing all the way through, because if all of those pieces don't align, you are going to continue to incentivize the short-term behavior.
So as strategic as you need to be,
Yeah.
and as patient as you need to be, we talked a lot about being culturally relevant, taking advantage of moments. You probably know where I'm going with this.
Yep.
So it only took me 10 minutes. I'm already talking about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, but we all want to know. So Seemingly Ranch comes out. Just please, as much as you can share, the behind the scenes of how you acted quickly to take advantage of this moment and launch this.
Absolutely. So I'll just take a step back just in terms of Heinz in general. And we've seen a really big resurgence of this brand over the last number of years. And it actually goes back to what I shared earlier, which is falling back in love with your brands. And one of the things when we launched actually this new platform globally, and it's the first global Heinz campaign, and we launched it back in May, June, and it was all rooted in this idea of love and irrational love. And the consumers actually wrote this platform for us. Heinz is made with and inspires irrational love, whether it's Ed Sheeran having Heinz tattooed on his bicep, or whether it's Adele keeping Heinz ketchup in her purse wherever she goes. And the multiple stories that if you just scour the internet and social and all of that stuff, this platform was written by consumers for consumers. And so by giving the teams that framework, that's why these moments come up. So back in February, I don't know how many people saw the ketchup boat guy story. And so this poor man was lost at sea for 24 days, and he survived only on ketchup seasoning and seawater, Heinz ketchup. And so it's by listening to these stories, and then we had to find Elvis, and using the community around to find Elvis so we could get him a new boat and support him financially. And that's similar to what happened with the Taylor Swift story. It's understanding and being so close to your consumers and what's happening in the conversations that are happening online, whether it's through our internal agency of the kitchen, combined with our incredible partners at Rethink and Zeno and everyone who got involved and heard this. And within 24 hours, we have a ton of flavors on Heinz. So we reskinned one of our previous formulations, had it out there within, oh my gosh, hours. And now it's being pre-sold at Walmart. And so it wasn't just this cultural moment that is celebrity chasing. It ties back to the strategy and the framework of irrational love. It's written basically by consumers and by an event and culture, and then giving the team the freedom and the framework so you don't need 27,000 approvals before something gets to market to truly be in the speed of culture.
I mean, that is key. So, I mean, go back 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Do you think this could have happened at the company?
No way. Quite frankly, no one really knew who the decision makers were. There wasn't a framework, and quite frankly, there wasn't freedom within that framework. And so, are we perfect? Absolutely not. And it is an everyday journey, and you learn every time you go through one of these things. Okay, where could we actually be more agile? Or, hey, where do we need a little bit more governance so it doesn't become the Wild West? But I think this idea of empowerment tied with accountability. Because I think what you hear a lot with teams, and I'm sure you guys hear it and feel it every single day, is you want this empowerment, but it doesn't tie to the accountability. And those two things have to be inextricably linked in order to have and ensure that these things happen.
Well, it's a great story. Congrats.
Thank you.
Shifting gears a little bit, just talking, on this theme of trends and overall currents, talking to obviously a room full of marketers here, and especially within CPG, rising food costs, inflation, supply chain pressures that still exist, retail media networks, you name it, the list goes on and on. Like, where's your head with everything right now? What keeps you up at night? Sorry for the cliche, but in terms of like those things that you really need to overcome, like what are the core challenges right now you guys are facing?
Yeah, I think, look, marketers have never faced, I would say, more challenges than we do today, just in terms of the complexity of how you connect with consumers and deliver on a connected consumer experience. But what I would also say is never been true more is that if you keep human and consumer at the center of everything you do, that actually helps really define your North Star. And again, that is a lot easier said than done. But what I mean by that is, as you think about the food and beverage world over the course of the next 10 years, there's about 4 key trends that are going to permeate and will continue to permeate. One is this idea and notion of exploration and authenticity, and consumers are going to continue to want to elevate their food experiences, but also diversify their food experiences. That's not going to change. The second piece that had a huge surgence and will continue over the next 10 years is going to be this quality without compromise. And so this idea of, as everyone's getting back to life and it's speeding up more than ever, is people are not willing to compromise on their food experiences, and they still want the convenience. So it's an and, not an or. And last, but certainly not least, we've actually taken holistic wellness and it's looked at in 2 trends. And holistic wellness is this idea and notion of comfort food, so food for the body and the soul, but then there's also, obviously, eating is the new gym, going to the gym. And so what health and wellness means to folks. And that's not going to change. So you take the root of it, which is what we believe is going to happen within the food and beverage industry over the course of the next 10 years, and then you add on the changing face of America and North America. You add on technology at the intersection of food, and then you add on all of the other pressures, and that's how we guide making our decisions. So in terms of what keeps me up at night is what I said earlier, which is accessible nourishment. Food that makes you feel good, that is accessible to the entire population. And so making sure that that guides everything we do, because being in 97% of households now, we need to be in 97% of households in the future, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And that has to look different than what it is today.
Well, as a parent of 3 children and a very busy home, thank you for the innovation. Thank you for the choices. We live on mac and cheese, Kraft mac and cheese, and actually the innovation of having it much more convenient, smaller sizes. The kids are able to pop it in the microwave. Like, just thank you.
Oh, actually, as we have that, has anyone heard of the crisp from microwave grilled cheesies launch? Has anyone heard of that? Okay, so you got to check it out. It's only regional right now. It's going national next year. But one of the biggest things in the convenience without compromise was, how do you leverage technology through food tech across multiple different products? So we actually have a new product that came out under Lunchables that basically your kid or anyone could microwave a grilled cheese in a minute. And it looks, tastes, smells, all of the senses, just like a grilled cheese you grill on a stove. And most people actually, quite frankly, when they hear about it, they're like, what? No way. I would highly get you to try this thing. And what we're doing is not only on grilled cheese, but we're doing it across a number of different products using the same technology. So this quality without compromising, this crisp tech platform, you'll see that actually be a big thing for us over the course of the coming months.
We will be first in line. Our family must be the focus group for your company because they live on mac and cheese and grilled cheeses. So
perfect.
Thank you. All right. So outside of your walls, innovation in the marketing landscape, advertising platforms like Snapchat, et cetera, et cetera. Like,
Yeah.
what are you seeing out there that has your teams excited, has yourself excited, et cetera? Like, where are we going? What do you love?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things and why I'm so lucky to work within the food business is connecting food lovers with food creators. And you don't actually have to be a chef or anything else to be a food creator. And so the ability through Snap or other platforms to connect food lovers with food creators, and that's where insights come in. We get most of our insights from what's happening within social, from what's happening in away from home and restaurants. The trends start there. And so as you continue to see this idea and notion of connecting food lovers with creators and how you actually bring that in to what we do as a business, it's been phenomenal to see.
So talk a little bit more about the creator landscape. I mean, is that obviously it's a priority, but in terms of overall priorities, where does that fit?
I think it's absolutely, it's one of my top priorities, because if we put consumer first, and this is what they're doing and this is what they're looking for and where trends start, in order for my team to truly be consumer centric, it has to start there.
Shifting gears from the brand innovator, how much time do we have left? Just curious. 15? Okay, thank you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about leadership, mentorship and leadership. So billion-dollar company, 97% in all households. You know, in terms of like keeping teams motivated and focused, like what does good leadership look like to you, either within the walls of Kraft or in previous experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's one that this is probably the question that I hold most dear, and it starts with the fact that I'm a mom first. So I am the proud mom of two daughters, Taylor, who is 12, Olivia, who is 8 and turning 9. And I would say my leadership journey has been a lot of learnings and a lot of running into walls over the course of 20 plus years. And I think it all starts with finding your authentic voice in leadership. How I lead is going to be different than how you lead is going to be different, but making sure that it's true to you. I think that's first and foremost. I remember a piece of feedback I got early on, actually, from an incredible boss, which was like, you're a robot. Like, everything seems like all together all the time. And I'm like, whoo, it's not the case. But that's how I was presenting myself to the world. And as a result, that actually didn't allow people to come in. That didn't allow the connection. Fortunately enough, that feedback was given to me really, really early on. And that changed everything for me. From that point on, it was, okay, what is most important to me? And I think the first thing was, well, as a mom, my children, no one else is going to raise my kids. And that comes with boundaries. So I work in the US, but I live in Canada. But that was a boundary I wasn't willing to compromise on. And given that I travel quite a bit, I normally, this week aside, have a 48-hour rule with my kids, is I won't be gone longer than 48 hours. And so to be able to put those boundaries in place, because then I'm able to be my best where I am. Because if I'm constantly thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm not home for weeks at a time for my kids, or if I'm not able to, I won't be my best within the office. I think that's one, is understanding what matters to you and how you define your boundaries is going to be different than someone else. And that actually came from another mentor as well. She was the first chairwoman of a Canadian bank. And she actually said, you can't have it all in the traditional sense, but you can have your all. And how you define it is going to be different than someone next to you is going to define it, but only measure your success on that, not on what the person is sitting next to you, because what you value may be different than the person sitting next to you. So it's finding your authentic voice and your boundaries. It's defining what your all is. And then I think how that translates to my teams is it's individual. Every single member of my leadership team is different, and what they value and what they're looking for in their career is different. So making a connection and understanding how they best communicate, what are the barriers, because in my job, it's setting the vision and, quite frankly, getting the barriers out of the way so that people can fly, and putting it in service of what they need versus what I need. has been something that's helped so much over the course of the career, but it's individualized because of whether it's I'm fortunate enough to look across a number of different functions. I have insights, I have media, I have innovation, I have brand communication, I have digital experience, I have new ventures. So what they're going to need in each part is going to be different, and that's okay. But if you don't acknowledge that and you don't learn what makes others tick and they're in service of you versus you being in service of them, it doesn't work.
So I love all of that, and I'm just curious, have you found that to be widespread within the walls of Kraft Heinz, and that mindset and that approach, given that the long-term nature of the company, somewhat conservative in its perception, this new philosophy and the way they manage and support employees, has it been an evolution for the company as well?
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress, and it's one of the reasons why I joined. And I've shared with some of you in the room before. When I first got the phone call to call Kraft to work at Kraft Heinz, I was like, nope, thanks, I'm good. And it was more so not because of the brands and business, but it was the culture and the reputation of the culture within the marketplace, and it was the reputation of actually not being based on mutuality. And mutuality is such a strong principle for me growing up in Mars for 13 years, but a mutual benefit is a benefit for all. And if we don't treat employees like that, or we don't treat partners like that, or we don't treat suppliers like that as true partners with that principle at the heart, it was not that way. And when Miguel came in and I met with Miguel and the leaders at the time, there was an acknowledgement of where we were as a starting point, but a true intentionality to change. And that, for me, was more important than anything else. If you know what you're walking into, and people are incredibly honest about that, and then if you have the opportunity to really be a part of that change, and what I would say is everything I've looked to do over the last 3 years, I have not changed me in any way, shape, or form, to a fault probably. But it's been more like anytime you see something that helps change the culture, everyone's embraced it. And I think that's been really, really important.
That's great. Mentors, do you have, you mentioned that you do, but do you encourage it with your teams too, or do they look at you as both mentor and boss?
I think yes, everyone needs a mentor. I'd say it's so incredibly important, and many times it shouldn't be your boss. I think it's so incredibly important to think about who your village is, and that village changes over time. I started in having like the group of 10, even when I was a brand manager. It was like, okay, who are the people internally and externally that can help me all the way through? And it always has to be a combination of internal and external based on the challenges I'm facing, but also on the key areas that I want to learn. What do I want to learn next? And that's always something that's in my mind. And as I've continued to grow in my career, that group of 10 has changed, and that's okay. I've got an incredible mentor right now, Margot Giordatis, who was the CEO of Ancestry.com. She was Google Americas, she was Mattel, and now she's the CEO of Montai. And quarterly we meet. And I always go in with just one question. And she goes for an hour in all the different ways of the key things that are keeping me up at night. So what I would highly suggest is figure out the group of 10, but compartmentalize it into what does it mean for your business, what does it mean for your personal development, and what does it mean for areas you really want to learn. Because that curiosity and constantly looking and where you want to learn next to go next keeps you inspired.
So as we wrap up, one of the things that I think is challenging for all of us is just how difficult it is right now, just given all the many options we have as marketers, the pressure on us to drive the bottom line, to grow sales, whatever your objectives may be. Just how do you keep yourself and your teams motivated right now? 1 year out, 5 years out, 10 years out? What are the core messages you're sharing with your teams?
I think when you're thinking of a transformation as massive as what we've tried to jump into, and I would say every company in some way, shape, or form is undergoing transformation, is just get started. Sometimes you wait for everything to be perfect, and it's one foot in front of the other. So whether it's declaring the big ambition of $2 billion or saying, and I think I set this out to the market before we even knew how to do it, but the personalized sauce machine, no idea how to do that thing. And we did it in 6 months with multiple partners. And I think the thing to keep motivated is momentum breeds momentum. One foot in front of the other, one thing hits. So whether it's ketchup boat guy or Taylor Swift or personalized sauces or microwavable grilled cheese, look, we're a multi-billion-dollar business. Is that going to change the bottom line overnight? No, but to get people believing that creativity in every form gets rewarded, yes. When you hear people externally talk about the things that you've done, that just is a recognition in of itself that we're moving in the right direction. So my only advice on things this big, when things seem so complex and so daunting, is 1 foot, recognize the 1 foot in front of the other, and that momentum breeds momentum. And sometimes people just need a cheerleader. Sometimes people just need you to remove the barriers that haven't been removed before, or to rethink how you actually organize yourselves. We had an innovation team that was trying to do renovation, extension, and disruption on a Tuesday night. Like, there's no way you're going to make leaps and bounds forward. So how do you take the things that have gotten in your way before and, quite frankly, blow them up? To actually achieve bigger ambition is putting 1 foot in front of the other, but not doing it in the way that you've always done it.
I absolutely love that. I mean, 5 years from now, it can create massive anxiety. What we can control is today and how we act today and what we do tomorrow. That's it.
That's it.
Love that. So I know we have a few minutes, a few questions.
Hi. You mentioned earlier that one of the first changes you were looking to make was to have people re-fall in love with the brands. How did you actually do that? Like, what did that look like on the ground?
Yeah, so what that looked like was first actually understanding what the brand stood for. Look, all of us, or many of us at certain points of time, have come into new brands and been like, I'm going to reinvent everything, without actually understanding the history. Heinz is a 150-year-old brand that actually the principles that rang true when it was launched ring true today. So first, it was actually doing an exploration internally and also with our agency partners of why should we love our brands? And what are the root? What is the core? What is the purpose of our brand? So that's one. I think the second thing was giving them the tools, whether it be internally or externally, to be able to try some things. So we internalized our agency, The Kitchen, and to have the ability to social listen and have the team act at the speed of culture. But it's not just our internal agency. The Taylor Swift thing was the combination of our internal agency and Rethink out of Toronto and New York. And so the second piece was having our partners go through the same process as we did, but also just eating the food. Like, to be honest, a lot of it comes down to so many of our partners and people internally weren't actually consumers of our own food. So understanding the purpose, retooling. If I think about innovation, it was actually changing the process. So on disruption, we actually just put dedicated pods and dedicated teams so that it was one separate team was focused on extension and others were focused on true breakthrough innovation, and having them actually go through an entirely different process of agile sprints. And I think then once people started seeing that out of these different focuses and out of these different teams came the love of our brands, we celebrated internally, we celebrated externally. And look, one of the things we did with Cannes was those who won our internal creativity awards get to go to Cannes. And so you incentivize that behavior as well.
Anyone else? Back here on the left.
Last month, and I thought it was super awesome. Obviously, such an amazing innovation. I'm curious how long it takes to go from sort of that seed of an idea to actually executing it, especially when it involves a layer of technological innovation. And in addition to that, also curious how you decide which innovation path to go down, because I'm sure there are so many ideas in the incubator right now, and how you decided on Crisp 360 and obviously all the ideas to come.
Yeah, great question. And I think so going back to the consumer first piece, it's the length of time is going to be dependent on how big the consumer problem you're solving is. And so everything we did was we wanted to be faster, no question. But are you going to get a crisp 360 total platform in 6 months? Probably not. Hey, 9 to 12, maybe. And so basically, once we identified the consumer problem, I actually put 3 different teams on it. 1 on the grilled cheese, and then 2 others on, okay, how can you use the same technology and apply it across multiple others so that you were parallel pathing. So that was one piece. On the personalized sauces, so the 200 plus sauces, that was an idea that was on a page for 6 years. And it was funny, it was out of a meeting with Microsoft. I was out at Microsoft a year ago, August, and was sitting there saying like, hey, we've got this idea, but internally, we can't seem to figure out how to best clean it, quality and food safety, like all of the things that go along with it. And they're like, hey, we've got the partners for you. So instead of trying to solve everything, and that took 6 months, an idea from 6 years, we briefed and in 6 months had an MVP. And so now I've got 12 different pods going across multiple different innovations, and they run on the agile process, which is sprints. And then quarterly, when we do what's called PI planning, their key criteria and KPIs to say, okay, persevere, pivot, or kill. And that's how we start to make the decision of once you get to those milestones, when the MVP, the minimum viable product, can go further. And so that's how we've been doing it. And then we're like, okay, and if we want to test with a certain partner, sometimes we're co-creating with different partners. So what I would say is it's dependent on the consumer problem you're solving. We're always looking to get faster. But more importantly, it's about sustainable value creation and not having this idea that, quite frankly, everything needs to be recreated internally when so many other industries have solved problems that we're looking to solve in food.
I think we have time for one more, right back here.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Abby Peoples. I work for Hallmark Cards. There's a lot going on in the CPG space, which you said that you are born and bred and will be in that for the foreseeable future. What does it look like for Kraft Heinz whenever it comes to brand partnerships and growth in that area?
I think partnerships are absolutely critical to our success, full stop. Whether it's who we partnership through the entire value chain to deliver on innovation, the number of suppliers continues to grow, as long as it's based on mutuality. That, for me, is absolutely critical and a big cornerstone of what we do, whether it's licensing opportunities or as you bring your brands back into culture. I think you're seeing more and more there. But the way I look at it is, does it align with the brand ambition? Does it align with the transformation? And can it be based on mutuality? But I am more than ever focused on partnerships because we can't do it ourselves. And you would never do it at the pace you need to do it without partnerships as a cornerstone.
Great question, and probably a good place to stop. Thank you for the partnership with us as well. You've been phenomenal, and congrats on your success to date, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the week.